Welcome to Technique Friday Part 2, well, Lesson 2. Now I'm going to break up. I got asked by one of my subscribers to actually talk about blending paint. Now I'm actually going to do a series on paint, but I'm going to start off with basic blending and talk about the colour wheel. So I just have a little pocket colour wheel and I find that it works for me very, very well. So on one side it has all the different colours in the spectrum, and then it talks about the gradings of those tones, right? And then on the other side, which is the side I'm going to focus on, it actually has when you add colours together. So if I was on a violet and then I added red to the violet, then I would come up with that colour there. If I added red to a red violet, I would come up with that colour there. And if I add red to yellow, I would get orange. If I added red to orange, a red orange to a blue, I would get some kind of a purple, but often you get like a purple to brown. If I added white to orange, I would get peach, and if I added black to yellow orange, and it depends on how much black you add, you would get a deeper tone of that. So if I were to take these colours and move them around the spectrum, if I was to add yellow to violet, so they are complementary and opposed colours, I would make brown. If I added yellow to blue in primaries, I would get a primary green. If I added yellow, and that's a blue violet, if I added it to more of a cobalt blue, I would get a different shade of green altogether. If I added the yellow to a blue green or more like a turquoisey colour, I would get more of a lime. If I added yellow to a primary green, I would also get a very similar lime. Have a look at that. One's yellow, one's blue, but if I was to do that and then you went to that one, you'd say that they were reasonably similar. If I added yellow to a yellow green, I would get a really pale lime, and if I was to put those two together again, that's the way it would go. If I add yellow to yellow, it stays the same. If I add it to orange, it's a lighter shade of orange or a deeper shade of yellow. And that's a yellow orange if I go into plain orange, very similar. If you grade them, you can have a look at the two colours there. And if I do a red orange, then I'm going to come out with a deeper orange. And if I do the two, you can see that it's tonally going down that colour spectrum. And there's your primaries. Red and yellow make orange. And again, I get back to the shades of neutrals because you're looking at opposing colours. But what I can say to you is that the only two colours that make neutrals are the violets and the red violets. The blue violet will make a green. So my tip to you in colour mixing is that apart from white, yellow is the next best colour to mix with. And different grades of yellow do different things. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to have a couple of exercises here where I just take some basic primary colours and then I'll show you what it does when you lighten both of those primary colours. They're still in the same family, you lighten them, and how that changes the way that you do things. But my big tip for you with colour mixing is white goes with anything, yellow goes with everything but purple. And that's why I often use white and yellow together when I'm blending almost anything except purple. And if I'm using purple, I'll put yellow underneath and purples on top, and I often will use white in between. Okay, let me zoom out. Okay, so I've got a primary, there's a cobalt blue and a primary red, a Napsol crimson, but it's a primary red. So I'm just going to pop a little two of those together. Now we all know, if we have a look at our colour wheel, that red and blue make purple, right? So, but what kind of purple do they make? I highly recommend that if you're going to do some colour blending at some point, that you invest in a colour wheel. Find one cheaply wherever you can, or print ones out on the internet. Okay, so when you get primary red and blue, and if I was to add more blue to that, it's all about how much of each colour you put in as well. If I was to add more blue to that, it's still purple, but it's more of a blue purple now than a red purple. But that's a very dark purple, isn't it? Right, so you get your colour swatch here and you see how dark that purple is. I'll just rinse out my brush. And now I'll show you what I mean about using lighter colours. So instead of a red, I'm going to use a magenta. And this is a deep magenta. And I'm going to use a lighter blue. And note that I've got more blue than red. Make sure that I don't have any primary colours left. Right. So when we mix that up and you've lightened the colours, different shade of purple, more of a jacaranda purple. It looks quite blue when I'm filming this, but it's actually quite a nice shade of purple, but it's blue, but it's not nearly so deep. So if I'm to take that again, and I use a light shade of blue, and I use a light shade of magenta, and I'll put these in equal tonings, equal amounts. So I have now equal amounts. Let's have a look and see what kind of purple this makes. And there you go. You have a lighter colour of purple again. It's a little bit more dominant with the magenta. I did equal tones of it that time to give you a really good idea. Now that gives you an idea that not all reds and purple, like if you're going to do colour mixing in mixed media, very, very rarely will you actually do your primaries, right? Very, very, very rarely. The only time I do that is usually when I'm mixing it with white as well. So I'm wanting that particular tonal colour, but I want to mix it with white because I want to lighten it out. Alright, so you're looking at different tonal colours there. The same thing if you've got yellows. So not all yellows are equal and not all yellows are the same. So there would be major differences if I had a cadmium yellow and a Naples yellow. You can immediately see the two tonings of that yellow, and if I did the same thing with yellow and blue, you would be able to see, and I'm just going to do two examples of it. So I've got the same blue that I started off with there with a cadmium, and then a pale, this is like a poster blue, but have a look, it's a very different shade of blue. With a Naples yellow. Naples yellow, by the way, is one of my absolute favourite colour yellows. It tends to blend, my goodness, with anything at all. This one will blend better with a red violet, a very light red violet colour, and by that colour I'm talking this kind of colour. the yellow blends very well with that. Right, let's blend these colours, and you can see what I'm talking about again in the gradations of the primaries together. Primary green. So if I was to have a look for that on the colour spectrum, no, that's more blue. Yep, so we're going more towards the primary here. So there's your green. That's very similar to like a leaf green. You often will find paint colours that are called leaf green. And if I take the two same colours, blue and yellow, but they're much tonally lighter, let's have a look and see what they make. You're going closer to a teal or a mint. Green. Very, very different. Same colour combination, both blue and green. So that's the quick lesson I want to give you today about blending some colours. My tip to you is that a Naples yellow is often my most used yellow. I use it so much, and if I don't use it, I tend to use a cadmium, and I'll tend to use white in it. So if you were doing a page, and this is how I start an awful lot of my journal pages. So I prep the page with gesso, usually. So when I do that, I tend to tint my gesso. So if I'm going to do a journal page, and I want some light and shade, and a little bit of dark, I'll think to myself, well, where do I want that? So I'm going to choose to put the light right smack bang in the middle, just for the purposes of this, right? And I'm going to put some dots to grade it around it. And then I'm going to grade it out. Let's see. What will I do? I have a purple, and it's a deep violet in a Liquitex. Okay, so I've popped that down the bottom, and then I've got a brilliant violet, and that's a blue violet. You can see that, so I've got a red shade and a blue shade here. And then I want to mix it with a magenta, and I want it to go to the magenta at the top. And I'm going to throw some yellow in, because yellow and magenta make an orange. Because magenta is in the red scale and the yellow, so red and yellow make orange. And I'm going to put some brilliant magenta down the side. Now have a look how these blend together. And it is about the way that you do your strokes. So I've essentially put all those colours on the page, and now I want to blend it together. And I'm going to have a little bit of water on my brush, not a lot. Now for me, because I want it very dark at the bottom, I'm actually going to start stroking this around at the bottom. And then I'm going to start mixing it in. And of course that white's going to give me a tonally different colour. And now I've got the yellow and the white, and I'm wanting to make that something big in here. And I've got the pink and the magenta. And now I'm bringing them down and mixing them all in together. And tonally, have a look at that. They've all mixed in together. I'm definitely looking at bringing the darker up in the sides. And there is the basis of a journal page. And if I really want to go back in, I can lay some of these darker colours in and use some blending strokes. And also too, if I want to deepen this colour again, because it's blended away, I can just chuck some in on the top because it has a completely different effect when you do it under. So if you're blending and then you blend with the dark on top, it's going to be the dominant. If you blend with it under, like I first showed you, it will not be the dominant. And you can see that darkness now coming up. And that when you're blending colours, that's something that you to be aware of in when you're blending, how things are drying and whether you do it under and over. Right? And so I used the only colour that I used that was on the cool spectrum was this. It's called Brilliant Violet. And you can tell that that's got more blue in it than red. If you're putting it next to the red, you can see the cool tone and the red tone. Okay, so that is my first basic blending. What I'm going to do in subsequent weeks is next week I'm going to focus, today I focused on some purples and blending and some primaries. Next week I'm going to do it colour by colour. I'm going to pick a colour off the colour wheel every week. So I'm going to pick one of these colours every week. So next week what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick red. And I'm going to show you all the ways to blend red and some different mediums in red. And then you can have a look at all the different effects that you can get. And you can follow along with me, and if you want to, you can create a reference guide on paint mixing. And you can use these lessons and do them in a journal, and then if you want to write over them what you learnt in the lesson, you can do that. Or if you want to start journal pages with the exercises that we do, then you can do that too. But I'm telling you now, I absolutely love that as a background, and I'm going to do something with it for sure. And of course, never let any paint go to waste. You can see the difference in hue of the purples. Very, very red purples, very, very blue purples. Okay, that's the end for Technique Friday for this week. Ciao for now.